everyone, it's Margaret Manning here, and welcome to 60 and Me. This is the place where women over 60 come to be inspired. And my guest today is Dr. Leslie Kernisan. Leslie is a medical doctor. She's also a geriatric doctor. And she has a website she's started, which is called Better Health While Aging. Better Health While Aging. It's a great site. It's really designed to provide practical advice for people who are dealing with the issues, the medical issues that come up as you get a little older. So welcome, Leslie.
Thank you. Thank you for inviting me.
Oh, you're welcome. Sorry about your website. It's a great title, Better Health While Aging. That's what we all want.
I know.
And in fact, that is one of the key pivots of our 60 and Me community, is healthy aging. That's so important. So I'm glad you're here, because until we started talking, I really didn't know what a geriatrician did or was. I did speak to Dr. Bill Thomas, who's also a geriatrician. I think you know him.
He's wonderful.
Yeah, he's great. And but I just wondered if you could take a minute to explain to our community what a geriatrician is and what you do.
Yeah. So I'd be happy to explain what a geriatrician is, and especially my true love, which is geriatrics.
Okay.
But so a geriatrician is a medical doctor specialized in geriatrics, which is a specialty of medicine and healthcare, especially focused on older adults. And one way to think of it is that it's a little bit like pediatrics. So just as we developed pediatrics because we realized that children did better when healthcare was modified to better fit with their growing bodies, with the fact that they're embedded, with parents who are a strong influence on their health and so on and so forth. We developed geriatrics because over time it became clear that as people aged, they needed modifications to their health, that things that worked in terms of healthcare for people who were younger not only didn't work as well or work the same way as people got older, but sometimes were quite harmful. So I think of it as the art and science of modifying healthcare so that it works better for older people. And it's both a knowledge base. We've actually learned a lot about how either diseases that people have earlier in life, about how they might change or have different symptoms when people are older. So for instance, a younger person with a urinary tract infection will have belly pain and burning. And when they're older, they might have nothing more than weakness and confusion. So illnesses can have different symptoms. They might need to be treated differently. Really importantly, people respond differently to medications as they get older. They become a lot more sensitive to the side effects, especially in terms of their thinking and their balance. And so the kind of risk-benefit ratio of certain treatments, changes as people get older. So there's this knowledge base, these things that we have learned about how better to manage the health of people. But then it's also this approach. So similar to pediatrics, you just have to talk to people a little bit differently or consider speaking to them differently when they're at certain stages. So we're ready to talk to someone who might be having memory difficulties, who might be having difficulties with their hearing. We're very attuned to the fact that family members are often deeply involved in an older person's life. And we really think about the whole person, because one of the things that happens as people get older is they tend to have multiple chronic illnesses and maybe some chronic difficulties in life with their mobility or maybe their thinking. And so the sort of standard approach of narrowing down on a disease or an organ and focusing on what's best for that disease or organ, it's not even great for people when they're in their 30s and 40s, but it's a real problem when people are older. They need this sort of comprehensive, big picture, holistic care.
We're very complex.
Yeah,
as we get older. But you mentioned at the very beginning that geriatrics was for older adults. So how do you define an older adult?
Yeah, so there is this tendency to conflate geriatricians with geriatrics. So geriatrics is the knowledge base and the approach, but you don't necessarily have to be a board certified geriatrician to provide care that is grounded in what we know or in our approach. So we have family medicine doctors who provide pediatric care to children. They have trained, and we would be very surprised if they were to treat a child just as an adult. So what we don't have is, even though most doctors do care for adults who are older, they don't necessarily implement geriatric care. And in fact, what they will tell me is, I practice geriatrics because I see lots of people in their 80s. And I say, the question is, are you sort of providing suitably modified care. So at what age does one need that care? And people ask me that a lot. So I find that there are 5 things that happen as people get older that make geriatric care more and more important. The first is that people become more vulnerable in their body or in their mind. And I think we start to see this, even when we're younger, that starts to take longer to recover from an injury, even when you're in your 30s and 40s. And so you have a little less resilience. And the reason why that matters is, again, that people become more sensitive to side effects. And we also start seeing more falls starting around the 60s. Now, for some people, it's later, right? Depending on how you lived your life, your lifestyle factors, whether you suffered from chronic illnesses or a lot of stress, you might start becoming more vulnerable sooner or later. Pretty variable, but that's probably the first thing that happens. The next one is just having those multiple chronic illnesses and more need for somebody to integrate all of that together. The next is we have these things called geriatric syndromes. It's not a very sexy name, but it's things like falls, depression, memory problems, isolation, incontinence. They're really common problems in older people. Usually the older you are, the more common. And in older people, they tend to have multiple underlying causes that are coming together. Whereas if a younger person is falling, you can usually drill down and find one specific neurological problem or cardiovascular problem. In older people, it's lots of things. So we've developed approaches that tend to be more successful for treating those. The next thing that happens as people get older is they do develop often a chronic impairment with mobility or their body or their thinking. And so then you got to sort of adapt the medical plan. You've got to think about what's feasible. And you want to focus more on, well, how do I help this person adapt to that or compensate for it so that they can still thrive, right? I mean, that might be more important than making sure that the blood pressure or something else is just so. And then the thing that I mentioned before was the involvement of family members. So when people ask me at what age do I need geriatrics, I say, well, it really depends at what age you start to have a lot of these happening to you. For some people, it will be even as early as their 50s or 60s. And there will be other people who are in their 90s and take no medication, say they have no chronic illnesses, live entirely independently. And really the only thing they have, even though they don't always realize it or want to admit it, is that they're fairly vulnerable, in that they could easily be knocked down by an illness that, when they were in their 50s and 60s, they would have resisted or bounced back from much more quickly.
So what you're saying, that's really helpful. That's super helpful. And I mean, I never thought about it that. I mean, the aging process is complicated enough as it is and profound in the simple things like wrinkles and, just those kinds of little body changes, belly fat and those silly things. And then you start thinking, as you've just described, these are other complications that are that come into play. But what you're saying is that geriatrics is really like an attitude to aging. You're providing a framework for people to look at all the different things that can happen. Go to your doctor, not necessarily a geriatrician, but go to someone that is can understand the complexity of medications and balance, for example, or so don't give me medications because don't give me medications that might affect my balance because I've noticed that connection. So what you're saying, I don't mean to be rephrasing you, but just like you kind of are like these 5 things you described are just like guidance for you to observe and then, go to a doctor or even yourself and make adjustments to your lifestyle.
Yeah, I mean, I think the more people have either accumulated health problems or are starting to struggle with daily life or developing impairments, the more that they're going to benefit from the geriatrics approach. But even people who are relatively well in their, let's say in their 60s, should probably be careful about medications that can dampen brain function, because that's a huge priority for people, and understandably, right? Maintaining our brains at their best is so important lifelong. And just making sure that they're careful about, their balance and falls and their strength. So I think what I want people, mostly to know is that there is this better way to manage all these aging health issues that come up, and some of them will even come up for people in their 60s. And I want people to know that it's there, and that your doctor, if he's not a geriatrician, may not think to implement that unless you ask about it. So Of course, the ideal would be for everybody to see someone who has been trained in geriatrics, and there's an increasing movement in the United States and probably in other countries to make sure that all physicians and all, nurses and health professionals, I mean, really, unless you're specialized in pediatrics or OB, you will be seeing older people, and everybody should be equipped, with basic geriatrics knowledge.
Yeah. Well, I mean, there is a growing population of older people. I mean, they are going to have to, they're going to have to do, but I think what you're saying too is you can be a little bit self-sufficient as well in sort of looking at your own aging health problems and, just bring that to the attention of a doctor, or even in your own lifestyle. For example, to try to do yoga or Pilates, exercise certainly to help with your balance if you're feeling you can't put your tights on without falling over.
Yes. Yes, and there's so much people can do, and I found that recently a lot of people are interested in a healthier lifestyle and a healthy aging lifestyle, and that's really important. And at the same time, people at some point start coming into contact with the healthcare system, and often they won't get optimal care unless they're actually pretty proactive and paying attention. And if you have a chronic illness, how that chronic illness is managed can make a huge difference. Or if you're not careful, you can easily be harmed by clinicians just giving you medications when maybe you could have been treated with fewer medications. I mean, people don't realize that their physicians are often very busy. And so I encourage people to sort of be informed and just take an active role. I don't want them to be too suspicious of their clinicians, but it sort of surprises me how people will pay much more attention to what happened when their car was fixed or when their house was renovated than they will double checking when their health is
I know it is a strange phenomenon, especially women. They were very timid.
So important.
Yeah.
Because so many of the age-related challenges that end up causing people a lot of anxiety and frustration are actually health-related. Yeah. So many of the things that people worry about for their aging parents track back to a health problem or things that they struggle with themselves. So nobody likes to worry too much about their health. And I think sort of making an effort to learn a little bit more and to just realize that I need to be a part of this. You know, I need to go in and just be ready to ask questions and not sit back and assume that I'll get the right care and the care that's sort of like suitable for my age and in line with what we know in geriatrics are better ways to care for older adults or people with certain, at a certain stage of life.
Yeah, it's a fabulous service you're providing, and it's your Better Health While Aging.net is your website. We'll put it up on the screen there so people can find you. And you've got a wealth of resources there. You have some guides, resource guides that people can read and empower themselves to get healthy and stay healthy. I mean, everybody wants to make the most of their lives on this beautiful planet, and we want to be healthy while we're doing it. And I think that you offer a wonderful service, Leslie. So thank you for all that you do. And
thank you.
It's really been great chatting with you. Thank you so much.
Thank you, Margaret.
Take care. If you enjoyed this video, please subscribe to our 60andMe YouTube channel and also visit our website. We are a strong and dynamic community of women over 60. We're challenging aging stereotypes, and every day we share fascinating stories, interesting questions, and great conversation.